Hello, you awesome friends. This is your pal, Edward's Ears speaking, and welcome back to another interview with Edward. I just got to say, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm very excited because our show has taken off globally because of your awesome support. Now, we've got one of my great friends on the show with us today. He's a very, very handsome and successful guy. He's a healthy guy, and he's a health coach. He's a networker. He's very well known across Sydney in the health circles and the meetup scene. And he's a great guy who has real and practical solutions. He's my awesome friend, Paul Harper. How are you today, Paul?
Ed, how are you? Very, very well. How about yourself?
I am really happy because I'm so honoured to have you with us on our show, Paul. Paul, can you tell us a bit about what you do and how you add value to people's lives?
Ed, so I'm a naturopath nutritionist by background, qualified 20-odd years ago. Been sort of working around this part of the world, also overseas, Europe and the US and the like. But essentially, look, what I try and do is to make healthier eating, healthier living fun and easy.
And you do that so well. Now, I know that obviously we're doing this interview during Corona, which we'll talk about shortly.
Yep.
And pre-Corona, you were huge in the meetup event scene across Sydney. I see you on Facebook and LinkedIn, and you've got a lot of friends around town. I was gonna ask you, Paul, how did you become so popular? How did you get so well connected and everything?
I think, I thank you for that, and I'm not sure. Look, we do my best. For me, I enjoy it. I made a conscious choice probably about 3 years ago now. I came back from the US around 10 years ago, came back here, went into clinical practice. I'd never worked in clinic before. And I realised throughout the part of my job that I really enjoy is just sitting down with people, bouncing ideas around about health and the like. And I enjoy the meet and greet and that. And I don't enjoy sitting in an office. So I thought I made a conscious choice to sort of shift how I do things and essentially just get out and about more. So for me now, meetups, for instance, your events and the like, and I run a few of my own. They're my work now. They're my networking, if you like. That's how I meet people and just that exchange, that that freewheeling, free giving, bouncing ideas around. That's the stuff that I enjoy. So I thought, good way to do business, right? Do more of what you like and less of what you don't. So yeah, that's kind of why.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, I mean, you're a healthy guy. You've given me some fantastic health tips. And I was going to say, as we know, it's Corona right now. Granted, Corona reached its peak a few weeks ago, and the world's reopening.
Yeah.
What's your take on Corona, and what are some of your top tips to people to not only survive these times but thrive in these times?
Look, it's an interesting time, isn't it? I think obviously we like you said, we've been through this lockdown. We're starting to come out now. Different countries are moving at different rates. In that, I think, look, the only thing that we really have control over, and I think also the most important thing, is taking responsibility for our own health. And there's a bunch of stuff that we can do for our immune system. The role of our immune system, of course, is to defend us from things such as coronavirus and, other viruses and infectious diseases and, chronic diseases and the like. So it's really just look after your health. Look after your immune system specifically, and if you want, we can get into some specifics around that. But it's really just take responsibility. It is interesting in that, as we come out of this lockdown, the social distancing, which has been, I guess, so important as part of managing this thing to date, that's going to be compromised by default. So looking after our own immune system. Doing what you can internally and not forgetting about, of course, but, focusing more on ourselves rather than worrying about what everybody else is doing is going to play a much more important role.
Because on that one, it's funny. As you know, I speak to a lot of people in health. You're the first one to really bring up immune system as a point. So I'd like to explore that a bit with you because, again, your background's amazing. And I know this sounds I'm sure this sounds like a dumb question to you, but what actually is the immune system? What does it actually mean? I hear it all the time, but I often feel like it means a lot of things. What is the immune system? What do you mean exactly, and how does it relate to us during Corona?
Okay. So our immune system is the system within our body that fundamentally protects us from harm. It's going to be our lifesaver in a lot of circumstances, such as obviously exposure to acute infections, also exposure, to chronic, lifestyle exposures. Stress, for instance, obviously is one, but also, the less than optimal choices we make around lifestyle, fast foods. A lot of these things are applicable in the business world because, of course, we're increasingly busy these days. People are very time poor, so we eat on the run. The food chain is not what it was in that. So anyway, our immune system is designed to protect us from that. That forms a number of, or it comprises a number of components, as it were. The first is literally our skin. So that forms a protective barrier to the outside world. Other components of that, of course, are our mucous membrane. So that's our digestive tract, but also our respiratory tract, which, of course, is very applicable at the moment with coronavirus. And then into our bloodstream, into our cells and the like, there's all sorts of different cells. Some of them are white blood cells and the like, that protect us against different types of, attackers, if you like, invaders, pathogens, whatever you want to call them. And some protect us from allergies, some protect us from, again, viruses and bacteria, some protect us from parasites, some protect us from, more serious illnesses, the cancers and the like. And that's what the immune system does. But I think very, very importantly, that's one of the immune system's roles. So a second role of the immune system, and this is a very important one also, and one that can actually compromise our body, our immune system's ability to perform that Department of Defense role, if you like. And of course, you've got a bit of a background in that space. You'll understand that, right? But it's also, if you like, it's the Department of Waste Management. So our immune system also is designed to protect us from, garbage, if you like. When we sort of, it's like the garbage collectors that come around and sort of pick up, our rubbish, our garbage, in the mornings, sometimes very early. Around where I live, it's very early on a Wednesday morning. And essentially the more work that the immune system needs to devote to waste management, the less energy that it actually has to devote to defense. So really the first thing and the most important thing we can do to really set a solid foundation for our immune system is stop putting so much garbage in, essentially. So this is, very much the foundations of what I do in terms of, okay, well, let's put in some good clean fuel that our body can run on, and essentially let's put less of the junk in so it doesn't need to devote so much energy to taking out the garbage every day.
I think you're preaching to the choir, and I'm sure everyone watching agrees with you. Can you give us some top examples of garbage or junk? What are the common examples and the mistakes that we make on a daily basis?
Yeah, so of course, one of the big ones is food. I spend a lot of my life, of course, talking about food. I'm the food police. But your fast foods, your processed foods, the pizza on the way home from the pub on a Saturday night or whatever. But also a lot of the stuff that we will, grab out of a can, grab out of a box or something during the week. And processed foods, they come, obviously with, the preservatives, the additives, etc., required to make them, taste good, to provide a long shelf life and the like. And our body is, we're not accustomed to those things. Fundamentally, we are part of nature. And the further we move away from that direct connection with nature, natural foods, whole foods and the like, the more, and I use the term garbage colloquially, colloquially, if you like. Yeah. But, essentially what it is, it produces extra metabolic waste. So our metabolism, of course, is essentially the all-encompassing arm or branch of our body that turns our food into energy. That's fundamentally what our metabolism does. And if it can do that in a very, very clean, energy effective way, it's almost like, well, you've got the perfect fuel for, your Ferrari. You're in a Ferrari, if you want to compare yourself to one of those. Whereas, if we're putting fuel in our body that produces more metabolic wastes, and often these foods, of course, are less effective at producing energy also, that's like putting diesel in your Ferrari. Or if you're a Formula One car, or, in the States, it would be a NASCAR or something like that. you've got a high performance vehicle, if you like, that our bodies are all designed to be, and we're putting just low grade diesel in them, and it produces a lot of waste. It reduces the efficiency of our bodies, and all that, of course, comes at a cost. So so that's food. Yeah. Food was one, of course. Alcohol is always a topical subject. We all enjoy a drink, but fundamentally, alcohol is not good for us. That's why, it makes us happy when we drink. It's having an influence. It's having, if you like, it's a word I don't like, but if you like, it's almost having a toxic effect on our brain. And again, this is no judgment call. There's no harm in having a couple of drinks every now and again and the like, and enjoying that time. But this is something that is going to provide the body with extra work to do in terms of the waste management department, and it is going to compromise its ability to look after us. Stress, of course, is a big one. This is an interesting time. It's probably causing more stress for some people. It's probably reducing the stress load on others. I'm personally, quite enjoying it, to be honest with you. And of course, and then there's the environment that we live in. So of course the air there's a lot of toxins in the air. There's exhaust fumes and the like. But the good news in that is, of course, this time with this global shutdown, it's been in the news, and nature is thriving. Nature is starting to come back. The air quality is better. The animals are coming about, and really, what's good for nature is good for us. And it's something that we forget within this sort of world that we've created for ourselves. But the closer we can get to nature, the better off we're going to be. In terms of the immune system, also, staying warm. Staying warm is very good for us. The fever response when we get sick and we get a fever, it's not the bug or the bacteria, if you like, that's creating the fever. It's our body's actual immune response that does that. So our immune response is actually at its most active a couple of degrees above our base body temperature. And what's happening when we get a fever is it's our body actually creating the environment in which our immune system can go to work most effectively. Wow. So there's a bunch of little things and that. Wow. All sorts of little tips.
Oh, well put, Paul. You're the first person to unpack that one beautifully, and I know our audience is loving it. And Paul, I was going to say, you mentioned fuels. What are some of the top fuels we can put in our body to help us, be that performance race car?
Yeah. Okay. Look, we're designed to eat real food. We're designed to thrive on what we call real food, if you like. And by that, I mean whole foods. The less processing any food, undergoes or goes through, the better it's going to be for us. So, we come to, there's actually, my favorite author on the subject is a guy by the name of Michael Pollan. He's an American, more of a journalist, actually. He's not any kind of health professional. And I think that's telling. But he actually writes the best stuff on health that the food chain, the food industry that I've read. My favorite book of his is a book called In Defense of Food. And in it, he pretty much sums it up. And he says, eat real food. And by that, of course, he means unprocessed food. So eat real food, not too much, mostly plants, or in my parlance, I'd say, eat whole foods, lots of plants. And really, if we do that, and we do that proactively throughout the course of our lives, and of course, then we talk about the 80-20 rule. If we unprocessed foods, fresh foods, plenty of plants, 80% of the time, we're good to go. We're good to go. I mean, a lot of my career I spent, kind of mopping up the damage, for want of a better term. People, come in and they're chronically ill and the like. It's avoidable. That stuff's avoidable. And in terms of, where we are at the moment, if, our bodies are healthy, we've got lots of energy, we're getting ample nutrition, and this is the vitamins and the minerals, etc., that come with the whole foods rather than processed foods. Most of us, our immune systems are going to be in pretty good shape to resist whatever we're exposed to. I mean, we see that every year with colds and flus and things like that. Obviously, this thing is a little bit different, but the healthier we are overall, the better shape you're going to be to manage any exposure in the first place.
Oh, very well put. I love where you're going, Paul. This is really good, and you've done a great job of unpacking it. And I was going to suggest, I was going to ask you actually, Paul, what are some of your top tips now right here and now during Corona, what are the things that you normally wouldn't suggest, but you suggest during Corona? There's a lot of us are inside. We're not exercising as much. We might be eating more processed foods. Just to be honest with you, because I'm not going to the supermarket as much for, social protection, I'm eating a lot of processed food. And I'm not happy. I agree with you. I've been eating so much processed food because pre-Corona, I go to the supermarket 2 or 3 times a week. I'm now going once a week, just in terms of that. What's your advice to people like me in the here and now that are kind of inside a lot and stuck with a lot of processed food? What's some of your tips to help us in the here and now?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the thing around fresh food in the moment and, like you say, the regular visits to the supermarket, it's starting to ease off a little bit, but it's something that's been a challenge, of course, for you with, your family and that as well, Ed. It's not just about you anymore, right? It's about what you might bring home. So, so that's important. Okay, so frozen foods. A lot of foods, when we buy frozen food, essentially what they are, they're foods that have, let's look, frozen veggies. Let's talk about frozen veggies. Frozen veggies have largely been harvested when the foods are coming off the plants, but they're coming off the plants largely ripe. Now, that's really important because what plants do in nature is they will draw the minerals out of the soil. And this is, of course, assuming that the nutrients are in the soils. And that's one of the other challenges these days. But it's all a matter of degrees, right? But these foods are harvested when they're ripe. They're coming out of the ground. The minerals are absorbed into the plants from the ground. And then the plants actually develop the vitamins and the phytonutrients and all these other, magic little ingredients that we're just starting to find out more about now. They actually formulate themselves based on the based on the minerals that they've drawn out of the ground during the ripening process. So one of the beauties of frozen foods is that they are not harvested unripe, like, a bunch of green bananas, for instance, but they're actually harvested when they're ripe and then, they call them snap frozen. But what that means is that a lot of the nutrient qualities in those plants at that time are about as high as they're going to get. The freezing process and then the thawing afterwards, you will lose some of them, but you will still retain a lot. So, right? So frozen foods or frozen veggies are a really, really good way to go.
So frozen foods aren't that bad, is what you're saying? Of course, raw foods are better. I'm not saying they're better than raw foods, but you're saying frozen foods, relatively speaking, especially in the context of Corona, aren't that bad.
Yeah, it's all a matter of degrees, of course. But absolutely, at this time, yes. If you can do fresh foods, of course. But then again, are those foods seasonal or not? Because if they're not seasonal, of course, there's a high chance that they have been picked unripe. They've been transported across the world, and then they've been put in cold storage for however many months, right, before they get to our plate. Now, during that time, the nutrient content is largely degraded and gone. So with all of these things, absolutely, nothing is black and white anymore. It's degrees of grey. But in terms of a simple yes/no answer, I'm afraid, of course, there never is one. But is it a poor choice? No, it's not a poor choice. It's a very good choice at this time when, like you say, we want to restrict our exposure to, the people and everything going on around us. And take home a nice big stock of the best choices that we can make that will last us for, a good period of time. So frozen foods, absolutely terrific. Some of your frozen veggies and things like that, with those sorts of foods, look at the can, look at what's on the back of the can. You want to obviously check that there's not too much salt in it. And you also want to check that there's not too many names, all these extra little ingredients, and you can't pronounce the names. If there's something that looks like a chemical equation listed as an ingredient on your food, that's something you want to minimize. The beauty, of course, with frozen foods is typically you're getting 100% of, the food itself. So,
and I suppose on that point, I mean, the benefit of frozen is that because it's frozen, you don't need the preservatives of something you leave on the shelf, of course, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, so that's a big plus also. And then, on top of that, then eat seasonally, of course, in terms of the fresh food, but cans are not the devil. Also, again, fresh is always better. But again, if you can do canned whole foods. So again, there's a difference between, let's say a can of kidney beans or a can of black beans and a can of baked beans. You know, it's all a matter of degrees. And of course, I'm talking, you know, again from my, you know, the nutritional perspective, as it were, as opposed to, you know, personal choices and preferences and the like. But it's very much, it's a scale of degrees.
Oh, very, very well said. I love where you're going. And you mentioned before as well, the more plants, which I agree with. I agree with that. Yep. Meat. So meat, seafood. We all know it. If you eat too much meat, it's not good for you, right?
Yep.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question, but what is the right amount of meat? Because I tell you what, I agree with you. Too much meat is not a good thing, right? And I'm sure anyone agrees. What's the right amount of meat or seafood with a meal?
Okay. So there's a couple of caveats to this, okay? The first thing is we're all human beings. We have different preferences, different tastes, different cultural upbringings, but we fundamentally are all human beings. Just like, you know, lions are all lions, tigers are all tigers, cows are all cows. We're all human beings, and yes, there probably is an optimal diet for the human species. In terms of individual tastes, preferences, and also foods that different people will feel good on. Of course, then we talk about, you know, allergies and food sensitivities and the like, but also our metabolisms are all a little bit different. And what I mean by metabolism, if we like, if we talk about our metabolic rate is the rate at which we turn calories into energy. Our metabolism is really all the biological activity that goes in our body. And of course, the raw materials that we put in forms a huge part of that. So, ground set, to come back to your question, Ed, that eat real food, not too much, mostly plants again. In terms of meats and animal products and all of those things, I will always recommend somebody goes and has, you know, a steak or a fillet of fish or something like that, as opposed to, you know, some mystery protein patty that, you know, with a list of ingredients a mile long, whether it's plant-based or not, if it's full of chemicals and full of preservatives and flavorings and stuff, the meat is closer to real food.
Yeah, because I agree with you on that one, because I eat a lot of vegetarian food, right?
Yep.
I'm almost a vegetarian, not quite, but almost a vegetarian. But I tell you what, sometimes you pick up a veggie patty in the supermarket and you flip over the box, and it's a science experiment. It's not food.
Exactly.
It's got some weird stuff in them.
Yeah, exactly. So always real food. The closer it is to nature, the better it's going to be for you. Now, then, to come to your question specifically, one of the things that I actually give out to clients, funnily enough, is a plate. Not a real plate, like it's a diagram of a plate. And essentially what I've done on that is, you know, create a little illustration, you know, PowerPoint, and it's essentially what an individual's food intake ideally would be for a day. Now, half of that plate is fresh fruits and vegetables, okay? So in this world we were just talking about, maybe some of the frozen, you know, foods would go into that, frozen veggies and like 50%, you know, all your greens and all your different veggies and stuff, some fresh fruit in there, that's 50% of the plate. The other half of the plate would be divided into thirds. Okay. Now, a third of that I would make protein, okay, animal proteins, bearing in mind that a lot of veggies are very good sources of protein also, but that would be, you know, your protein concentrated foods. So in here, of course, we, you know, go all your steaks and your meats and things like that. You would put your eggs in there, your fish, some dairy in there. But of course, we're not talking about hamburger patties. We're not talking about sausages. We're not talking about, you know, chicken McNuggets, right? Any of that sort of stuff. You're talking about fresh meat and the like, right? The next third would be, you know, your concentrated carbs. So carbs are not the devil. Carbs are not bad for us. You know, there's a whole other conversation, you know, in that about, you know, how they've become known as bad. Because the human body is designed to run really, really well on carbohydrates. But, you know, there's some caveats to that around weight loss. And, of course, most people's health goal primarily is weight loss and, you know, so anyway. But carbohydrates, okay? So, again, here, whole grains and legumes. You know, so your rice, your quinoa, you know, your beans, baked root vegetables, so your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, you know, all that sort of thing. They're good carbs. We're not talking about donuts or Tim Tams or Oreos if you're in the States, right? That's not the carbs you want, okay? But so again, whole food. And then the final third is going to be your concentrated fats and oils, okay? So here I'd put, your coconut oil and whole coconuts even better. Of course, you've got avocados and olives and, your nuts and seeds, and things like that. We're not talking about, those highly refined supermarket cooking oils. We're not talking about... I can't think. Ice cream wouldn't even fit in there. But, some of these, junky sort of fatty foods, we're not talking about deep fried Mars bars, all that sort of thing, right? So it's whole foods across the board, but 50% fruit and veg. And then the other half of your plate, 30, which will give you what, like about 15, 16, 17% of your diet would be protein, concentrated carbohydrates, concentrated fats. If you're looking at it, the average individual, probably a fist-sized serve, say a steak or a chop or something like that.
Oh, Paul, well said. I got to say, I love the way that you've put this information across. I was going to say, as we bring our interview to its epic conclusion,
yes,
I'd love to hear some of your closing thoughts with our wonderful viewers around the world on how they can maximize their health during these times and any closing ideas you have for them.
Okay, so everything we've just spoken about here. So eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. The processed wood, or the convenience options, I guess, as we've talked about in terms of using the frozen and the canned whole foods. Exercise. Do get out and about, or even do a bit at home. I know a couple of your clients and stuff have been putting up like great, workout routines and things like that. Very, very important. Keep moving. Stay warm. Okay, our immune system is at its most active when we're warm. Stay hydrated. Okay, especially against exposure to like the virus and that at the moment, and we're coming into the sort of flu season in the southern hemisphere. Our mucous membranes are our primary route of exposure, as it were. They're less effective when we're dehydrated. They're less effective when we're dried out. So stay well hydrated. A good way to monitor your own personal hydration levels, bearing in mind that we're all different shapes and sizes, is about 6 to 8 nice strong urinations per day. If you're weeing nice and strongly 6 to 8 times a day, that will tell you that you've got your hydration levels right in relation to, your size, your lifestyle, diet, all that sort of thing. There's a couple of supplements as well that can be very effective. Echinacea, of course, is something that people hear a lot about. Echinacea is specifically antiviral, and it's also very, very effective in the early exposure. So if you feel yourself coming down with a bit of a sniffle, if you feel a bit of a cough, echinacea is very effective at that specific time. Vitamin C is specifically antiviral, very good for us. Vitamin D, of course, is something that's getting the rounds at the moment. But with supplementation, very, very important, but also very, very quite difficult to pull off, is food concentrates as opposed to synthetics. If you're buying a vitamin C and you see on the ingredient label, again, we look on the label just like we do our foods, and you see ascorbic acid, so many milligrams, that's a synthetic. And it's not nearly as effective as a whole food. If you see something like acerola cherry or acai berry or something like that, that is a food-sourced vitamin C, and that is something that is going to be much more effective for your body. Zinc is something else again, so pumpkin seeds, ginger is great sources of zinc, all little things, but fundamentally, eat real food, not too much, mostly plants, move. Echinacea is good for you, stay warm, stay well hydrated, lots and lots of vitamins, whole food vitamins.
Oh, Paul, so well said. You've got my head buzzing. In a few areas, I can tick the box. In a few areas, I'm going to cross the box, but I'm going to work on it. And Paul, I just want to say a big thank you. And I was going to say, I'm sure a lot of people around the world watching this interview are very impressed. If they want their help and to get in contact with you, how can people reach out to you?
Okay. So I do a lot of work online, Ed. I am able to work with people around the world. I also, I guess, I have a background specifically in the US and the UK for anybody that might be in those markets. So I could not only work with them personally, but I can actually access them to, goods and services that they might need on the ground there. My email is info@highenergyhealth.com, or of course, www.highenergyhealth.com. And if anybody wants to reach out, I'm happy to have a chat or connect them with people on the ground there if we can't work together on a personal basis. So.
Paul, I got to say thank you for your time. I've learned a lot in this interview. You got me thinking, and I'll tell you what, I can't wait till Corona ends and we get back to it. And Paul, I just want to say, final word to you. Thank you so much. We absolutely appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Ed. It's always great to catch up. Thanks, mate.